A lot of people think that they can't have a garden because they have a small backyard, but that's actually the lie they want you to believe. So here's 10 efficient ways that you can garden with a small backyard. So let's garden on. Did you know that you can grow a lot of different types of fruit trees in containers? So without container gardening, I wouldn't be able to grow as many things as I do in my small space. So that's the first way that you can maximize your space so you can get the most out of your small backyard is to grow in containers. So I have a ton of fruit trees growing in containers, everything from citrus to peach trees to apple trees and even some fruiting cactuses. So another way to maximize your growing potential in a small backyard is to garden in raised beds. So raised beds have a lot of benefits, but the number one benefit is that you can control the quality of your soil. So you can get better drainage and better aeration. Plus these raised beds look better and they last a long time. I love the orange color of this raised bed, and I have another raised bed with the same color. So if you want to check them out, they're called Vegega Gardens. I'll have a link in the description with a small discount for you guys. But with raised beds, you're able to grow things that you probably wouldn't be able to grow in your ground. Like I have some utilities buried in my backyard. So instead of risking hitting, say, like a water line or some kind of buried cable, I don't have to dig in my ground with raised beds. So like with these apple trees, you would have to dig a pretty big hole, which puts you at risk to hitting something you might not know is buried in your yard. But with raised beds, you don't have to dig. And plus, like I said earlier, you can control the soil. So raised bed gardening is one of the most efficient ways to garden in a small space. So another essential method to gardening in a small backyard or space is to garden vertically. So this is the Greenstock Vertical Garden Tower. So in this tower, I'm growing onions. I could have the space to grow onions in my small backyard, but I don't want to take up all that space because it's using up valuable growing space that I can grow other things in. So instead of growing my onions, say, in one of my raised beds, I can grow it vertically and save a lot of space. You can also consider getting a trellis if you want to grow something like squash. That way you can grow up rather across your garden. So like with vertical gardening, you can save a lot of space. So I highly recommend looking into vertical gardening if you're gardening in a small space. So another way to get the most out of a small backyard garden is to do companion planting. So companion planting has a lot of benefits, but one of the main benefits is that it can help deter pests. So whenever I grow tomato and pepper plants, I always grow basil. But the good news is that you don't have to spend extra money on basil plants. You can just buy basil seeds and direct sow them into your garden in most zones around the country. So basil can help deter pests like tomato hornworms and aphids, which are common pests for tomato and pepper plants. So a good way to protect some of your plants is to look up some companions for them. That way you can just grow more plants rather than using pesticides. So another way that you can garden in a small space is to use hanging baskets on a plant stand like you see right here. So I'm growing some cactuses on this plant stand. Like we got a monkey tail, which is actually one of my favorite plants in my whole garden. I have a coral cactus and then some Christmas cactuses, but you don't have to stop at cactuses with hanging baskets. You can grow so many other things with hanging baskets. Like you can grow some herbs, you can grow flowers so you can attract some bees and other pollinators. You can even grow strawberries, but strawberries aren't really good for my climates. It just gets too hot over here in Texas. But if you guys want to check this plant stand out, I'll have a link in the description. Also, if you want to grow mint, this is a great option. So instead of putting mint directly into your garden, say in one of your raised beds or directly into your ground, you should definitely grow them in a container, like in one of these hanging baskets, because mint is basically like a plant bully. So whenever you put it in the ground, if you have anything else with that mint, it's going to take over and kill everything else, and very soon you only have mint. So always grow mint in a container, and again, a hanging basket is a great option for mint and other herbs. So another tool that you can use to help you garden efficiently in a small backyard is square foot gardening. Basically what square foot gardening does, it helps gives you guidelines so you can give your plants the right amount of space. Basically about a square foot for each space. So I have 6 tomato plants over here, and each of them has about a square foot each. So I'm kind of breaking those rules a little bit because in between each of these tomato plants, I also have a pepper plant. So I guess the general guideline is to use it as a guideline and see what you can get away with. But I guess later in the season, we'll see how far I can push those boundaries. So another thing I recommend if you're going to be growing in a small space or in containers, and if you want to grow fruit trees, you should be looking into dwarf varieties. So growing a full-size peach tree will be pretty difficult for me. That's why I got this bonfire peach tree. This is a dwarf variety. So when I first got it pretty recently, it was loaded with flowers. So I have a little bit of an update. Since that time, all the flowers have dropped. It has developed more of the red signature leaves, and there's even a bunch of little peaches developing on this tree. So I traded flowers for peaches, which is much more better. So again, if you want to grow fruit trees, but you're stuck to containers, you can grow dwarf varieties, which is going to be much easier. So another essential tip I have for you guys who are gardening in a small backyard is to plan for succession planting. So basically what succession planting is that you plan out ahead of time what you're going to plant after you pull something out of your garden. So for example, I have some potatoes growing right here in this raised bed. So as soon as I pull out these plants, I'm going to have something planned to go into its place. So these should be ready to be harvested around May. So, but by that time, it's going to be really hot here in Texas. So I'm going to need to plan ahead of time for something that's going to be able to tolerate that heat in May. So when I pull these potatoes out, I'll probably add some okra because okra likes the heat. So I think that would be a great succession plant to replace these potatoes with. So another critical thing to consider when you garden in a small space is to know where all your sun is. So that's why I have everything against the fence so I can maximize the sunlight that I get in my garden. In other words, I don't want to be growing things where it gets a lot of shade. So I make sure that I use containers, raised beds, and anything I can. So I make sure I maximize that space so I don't miss out on any sunlight in my garden. All right, so another option might be if you have a backyard that's way too small for a garden, or maybe you don't have a backyard at all, you can also grow some houseplants. So I recently just got the cinnamon tree, so you can grow things that you typically would grow outside, inside as a houseplant. So you can also grow like a lemon tree or a coffee tree inside as a houseplant too. So I guess the bottom line is if you can't grow something outside, you might want to consider to see if you can grow it inside as a houseplant. Alright guys, so I hope you found those 10 tips helpful on how to garden in a small backyard. If you found any information in this video helpful, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more gardening videos. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side of the garden. Thanks for watching.